In our last session, we began to build on all that we saw through the Old Testament, through Daniel, through what Jesus shared, and through what Paul and John shared in their letters. And we finally arrived at the book of Revelation. I said at the beginning of this series that there were some things that were debated and there were some things that had different possibilities. And I would do my best to present to you the information to allow you to make up your own mind. And yesterday we introduced the first of two possibilities for the Antichrist, two possible interpretations for everything that we heard from Daniel and Jesus and Paul and John. And we looked at how, where Daniel had said when sin reached its height, the Antichrist would come, and where Paul spoke about the man of lawlessness being held back until the appointed time. And in Revelation 6, we see Jesus breaking the seals and releasing what's holding back the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And in that, we can see how what we see with the white rider at the head of the four horsemen is the first possible solution for who the Antichrist is. But this is not the only possibility. And in today's session, we're going to look at a second possible identity for the Antichrist in the account of the end times. And remember, these end times are about Jesus ending the wrong and bringing in the new kingdom. If you recall, when we looked at the book of Daniel, we said that there's lots of signs and symbols in prophecy where we see pictures of things that represent other things. And we also looked at this incredible timescale that God has, where there's 1/7 remaining, which is the Tribulation. And we saw that that 7 would come when the Antichrist makes a deal with the people of Israel, a peace treaty with the people of Israel. But halfway through that 7 years, 3.5 years in, he breaks the treaty. And we see that in Daniel chapter 9 and verse 27. Remember that the Jewish calendar had 360 days in a year. And so when we start reading Revelation, we see lots of references to 42 months or 1,260 days, which in the Jewish calendar is 3.5 years. And in the account of the tribulation, in the account of end times, when you start reading from Revelation chapter 6, Revelation 6 to Revelation 12 deal with the first 1,260 days, the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. And there's talk within there, and you get to Revelation 11, there's 42 months for two witnesses who stand up and testify to the hope that there is in God. And halfway through the tribulation, at 3.5 years, 1,260 days, these two witnesses are killed. And we then see something change, something shift in the tribulation, where it goes from something absolutely terrible and bad to something even worse. In chapter 13 of Revelation, we see this image that this dragon comes up and raises up a beast. Now, the Revelation, it identifies the dragon clearly as being Satan. And there's some incredible imagery in there of how Satan and his angels were thrown out of heaven. And a lot of what we understand about the demonic, we can draw from some of that. However, we also need to recognize that the beast is a symbol of power and is a symbol of cruelty of dictators. And a symbol of the beast has been used many times for many different dictators. And just look through history and see that. But what we see when we get to Revelation 13 verse 5 is this break point where we've had 42 months and there are 42 months to come. We've had 3.5 years of tribulation with the four horsemen riding out and famines and disasters and wars. And then we get this picture of a dragon rising up a beast. And for the next 3.5 years, we see this disaster come. The second theory of the Antichrist is that when we see the beast, we're seeing the Antichrist. Let me explain that and put that into a bit more context. when we see the picture of the beast is opposed to the people of God. He is AntiChrist. And within there's a picture that the beast appears to have been raised from the dead. We see that in verse 3, where he's got a damaged head that's come back to life. And so what we see is a picture of a false Messiah who appears to have been raised from the dead, who's inviting many people to follow and to worship the dragon. And the Bible says that many people worship the dragon because of the beast. So what we have here is a picture of the beast rising up in opposition to God and inviting false worship. Start to trigger some memories. But if we look back to Daniel chapter 7 and verse 7, we see this prophecy that there will be 4 kingdoms. And the first kingdom we see is a picture of a lion with eagle's wings, representing the Babylonian Empire. We then see a picture of the bear, this slow rumbling Medes and Persian Empire that's succeeded by a leopard, fast moving and swift, followed by the beast. And we see the pictures of Daniel's kingdoms, Daniel's territories, repeated in chapter 13 verse 2, where we see the pictures being summed up. Again, where you see the leopard, we see the bear, and we see the lion being followed by this beast. The beast has 7 heads. These represent 7 different leaders. But it also has 10 horns. 10 horns was prophesied in Daniel chapter 7 verse 7, and they speak of power and authority. And he also has 10 crowns on his heads, which again speak of authority. And what we see if we look at 2 Thessalonians 2 is that the Antichrist receives his authority from Satan. He comes representing Satan. And what we see in this picture of the beast being raised up by the dragon is that he's given authority by the dragon. It's possible that halfway through the tribulation we see the Antichrist come. So on the one hand, we've got the first rider of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in Revelation chapter 6 being released. What's holding him back is released by Jesus. And we see that this tribulation begins, and the four horsemen, led by the white rider, bring the things that we see Jesus saying into pass. Balance that with what we see in Daniel 13, where the beast comes up and seems to represent and fulfill a lot more of what Daniel said. We're left with 2 possibilities, and I will leave you to make your own choice. But the message needs to be clear. We need to choose who we're going to serve, because these images come in opposition to God, and they come to show what happens when sin runs full length. And we have a choice of which God we wish to serve.